Snafu is a podcast that contains adult themes and language. Listener discretion is advised.
Hey guys, welcome to Snafu, where the situation's normal, all fucked up. This is the podcast where we tell you stories of true crime, true mystery, and the truly fucked up shit that happens every single day, and then we just forget about it. So, we decided we wanted to remind you. I'm Shannon.
And I'm Corey, and we're glad you're here giving us a listen, guys. Thanks for coming back for this episode.
Yeah, I'm super stoked about this topic this week. So this episode is going to be really fun. We get to talk about the blues, the cults, and we even get to talk about a murder that's never been solved.
Yeah, this week we're going to be telling you guys about the legendary blues man, Robert Johson, who's known as the king of Delta blues, and he may have sold his soul to the devil to get there. Maybe.
Pretty exciting though, isn't it?
It really is. I mean, this episode is going to have a lot, you know, because you got good music, you're going to have some bit of mystery, and definitely maybe a murder.
And you know what? I'll just outright admit, I love the blues. I think it's one of the best genres of music out there, but I don't think I've actually asked you whether or not you even like the blues.
I mean, I do enjoy it. I grew up kind of listening to more like Eric Clapton, so not this old blues that you always listen to. But if it's playing, especially when I was out in New Orleans, I'd always go take a time to go see it.
Yeah, that's more of the later blues rock genre, you know, Bowie, people like Eric Clapton. And in fact, the guy we're going to be talking about today, Eric Clapton, bowed down at the feet of this guy. And I guess that's why you're right. Like, I like the older stuff. I'm more of a fan of like Muddy Waters and B.B. King and
My
Ruth
mom
Brown.
would listen to B.B. King a lot, so I do know B.B. King, but again, not all that well.
Yeah, BB he's amazing. Like, I will always regret never actually getting the chance to go see him live. The man was playing, like, up until his 80s. And if you want to listen to something fantastic, go listen to BB. Go listen to Lucille. Like, the man is a blues god. That's, you know, for sure. But for me, it could be any blues. For me, music is about where you are. You know, and like what mood you're in. And for me, the blues means I could be sitting in a room all by myself with, you know, a drink in hand and the lighting's real dim and I can just feel my feelings, because that's what the blues is about, is like talking about what makes you sad. Like, what is your woe? And we all got it. Like,
it's emo before emo.
It truly was, but it's way better than like a bunch of goth kids like kicking around cans in the street.
Oh,
like,
yeah, no, I was going more for the feeling of it, not necessarily the style of it. I know blues a lot better.
But I guess, I mean, when it comes down to it, like, I can say I love blues, and I do, but that just makes it makes us music lovers. Does not make us professionals at all when it comes to music. We are not musicians. So I do have to say that we don't really know technique, all that good stuff. So I hope you guys can give us a little bit of a pass for this today. We're not going to dive too deep into what the blues is, but we're going to do our best to describe it so that, you know, we have a quick clue of what it is that made up Robert Johnson's life, and that was the blues.
So let's at least tell you a little bit about blues. Now, the blues is a genre of music that has its beginnings in the deep south of the United States. It's thought to have been first popular in the 1870s as it grew from the recently freed African American communities. Blues has its roots in old spirituals, work songs, field chants, and it just kind of really comes from a narrative tradition.
Yeah. I mean, with freedom from slavery, you also had some freedom of expression. Now, I wouldn't say that this happened quickly. I wouldn't say that they could say whatever they want anymore without repercussion. We all know what the times were like and what, you know, laws were like, and basically how dangerous it was back then. But at least for the first time ever, this group of people had the ability to sit down and freely say the things that bothered them. You know, life's hard, working's hard, you know, sometimes you just want to express it. And for the first time ever, a very creative cultural group had the opportunity to express it, and they did. And that's where blues kind of got its life from. And it really helped that at this point in time, things start really changing quickly. I mean, we're talking electricity starts coming out, radios, phonographs, records, the ability to not just express yourself, but to actually get it out there for the masses to start hearing or seeing. That was something that was totally new. And even the average guy could do it. And so blues really got built up because of this.
Yeah.
To top that off, all throughout the United States, juke joints began popping up. And with that, musicians looking to express themselves, like we were talking about, they start popping up all over too, and actually have a place to start playing it at. So that is super fun. And if you guys don't even, know what a juke joint is, they're places that were like pop-up bars essentially made for the average working black person. So again, it's not that we want to have to talk about it, but it's the fact that segregation was a thing. And so even if you're out in the field or out at a factory at the end of your day, you want to come home or you want to, get all that shit off your shoulders and want to go sit down and have a drink, you couldn't do that at certain places. White people weren't normally allowed in juke joints, and black people weren't allowed into the social club or the country club or the regular bar on Main Street. So this is where they got to go. And juke joint is actually a word that comes from the Gullah culture, which is a group of African Americans out on the east coast of South Carolina, Georgia, a little bit of Florida. They kind of speak like a Creole English, and juke in their language stands for rowdy or disorderly. So it's a fun place to go. And they were
Definitely
popping up.
it.
They were popping up everywhere. You can even call it a barrel house. Like, it's literally just a small shack with alcohol, and you could go dance and listen to music and have a smoke and have a drink and have some fun for the working man.
Yeah, and as many of those are popping up all over, bluesmen, they're traveling to get to these joints. And they're starting to play music, and, you're getting blues that's evolving. So kind of back to the actual structure of blues music, like we're saying, it's kind of that music that lets you bare your soul out. And it's never a happy sound, really. So it's played on guitar, and it's always kind of like they're playing flat notes.
A lot of people refer it to blue notes.
Yeah.
So this is just when the chords are flattened to a different pitch, like a more flat sound than a higher pitch sound. And like Corey said, guitar, acoustic, steel guitar. It's got a toe tapping beat, maybe a harmonica, and it's kind of like a folksy music.
Yeah, and the first songs were very simplistic, mostly consisting of a single line repeated 4 times. And with time, the music evolves, and like we're saying, it's going to evolve for different areas, Chicago blues versus Delta blues, which is what today's focus is going to be on. But it evolves into like an AAB pattern where, you're just extending the song out by still repeating a line over 4 bars, repeating it again, and then bringing a concluding line into it.
Yeah, it was very simple in the very beginning. I mean, why would it have to be anything else? But it's going to start changing. Like, there's no way to talk about B.B. King and talking about Eric Clapton and call that simplistic.
Right.
But by 1908, we have to remember this is still like a really early, we're talking 1870s. So only by 1908 did we first see the first sheet music for blues music. And that's along with the juke joints. That's along with it starting to spread around. Like, it is growing.
Like we're saying, blues kind of evolves by its region. So you're going to be having Chicago blues, you're going to have country blues, and Delta blues. And Delta blues is where Robert Johson comes into the picture here. Obviously, Delta blues is going to be the music that comes from the Mississippi River, and mostly focused in the Delta, so down in southern Mississippi, but it kind of stretches all the way up from Memphis, Tennessee, through Arkansas, and to Mississippi. And the instruments that would dominate this genre were the guitar and the harmonica and a slide guitar, and it all kind of stems from the diddley bow, which is a fun little instrument. So the diddley bow we're going to kind of get into a little bit later in the episode.
That's not even a real thing. A diddley bow is not a thing.
Yes, it is.
Bo Diddley, maybe.
Bo Diddley is a person who played a diddley bow. The diddley bow, like I said, we're going to get into a little bit later, but it's a very rustic and homemade guitar predecessor, like a proto-guitar.
It's a poor man's guitar.
Yeah, and you're going to play a lot like a slide guitar, but we're going to talk about it a little bit later in our episode.
What is it?
It's a guitar that's built out of like a cigar box, a long glass bottle that's hollow, and a like string of baling wire, and it's the instrument is plucked like a guitar, but the musician also has a slide on their finger, which in the case of it being a homemade instrument is typically like a bottleneck that they put on their finger to depress the string, and you move it up and down the string to change the pitch while you're playing the song, and it kind of makes it sound like more than just one string in a way. It's a very cool instrument.
How many strings would it have?
1 to 3.
So, like, really super simple.
Yeah, like I said, proto-guitar. It's very, very basic and very much a predecessor to the guitar. But yeah, kind of getting back into the music, even today, some of today's biggest blues names can be associated with Delta blues. And you'll be hearing, a few of them today. There are guys like Son House, Tommy Johnson, Freddie Sprell, Muddy Waters, and so many more. It's a really iconic form of the blues.
And for Robert Johnson, the Delta blues was everything. And that's why we think to become the king, he might have sold his soul to the devil. But let's tell you about him.
I'm ready for the deep dive into this.
Yeah, well then let's do it. Let me tell you about Robert Johnson. Like I said, Robert Johnson will be considered the king of the Delta blues, but when you really break it down, he only ends up with 29 recorded songs to his name. His career was incredibly short, and that's due to the fact that, he got murdered.
Oh.
And we still don't know who did it. And to build it up, the man's really turned more into a legend. Like everybody in history, unless you come from a super wealthy family or you were a king of some kind, you typically don't make a big wave into history. And at some point, neither did Robert. In fact, we've only got 2 actual photographs of the man for his entire life. Every now and then, a third rumored one pops up, but then it always turns out to be false. So there's just actually very little that people can factually say about Robert Johnson's life. Historians have been trying for years to put it together, and only now do we seem to have enough collective out there to kind of see like a picture of the man. And this is probably why stories that get told about him, they kind of grow into more of a legend, more of a myth than anything else. There's so little we could definitely say about the man that the crazy wild stories that start building up around him, they're hard to deny because there's hard to prove or not prove one way or the other. So we're just going to try and break it down the best we can. So Robert Johnson was born to Julia Major Dodds on May 8th, 1911 in Hazelhurst, Mississippi. But his father wasn't her husband, Charles Dodds.
Uh-oh.
Yeah. Right away, Robert Johnson gets born into a very complicated family situation. So Julia and Charles already had 10 children together previous to Robert being born. And so Charles was actually, for him, he was pretty well to do. He was doing financially okay. He was a landowner, and he was known to be a good furniture maker. And at some point, before Robert is born, unfortunately for Charles, he gets run out of town by a white lynch mob looking to kill him.
Oh. He
makes it out alive, but he ends up having to run really far and ends up all the way in Memphis, Tennessee. So you think, oh no, his family, they're pulled apart. What do they do? Well, Julia ends up getting a boyfriend named Noah Johnson, who's a local sawmill worker. And that turns out to be the reason why we even have Robert Johnson in the first place. That's his daddy, her boyfriend. And you're thinking, you might start be judging her right now. I will warn you not to, because we do not know their complicated situation just yet. Turns out Charles has his own mistress and 2 other daughters by her, and that's who ends up joining him up in Memphis, Tennessee.
All right, yeah, that's a complication.
It is. And so Julia is stuck in Mississippi trying to take care of business. So, he's got a mistress. Who's to blame her for having a boyfriend? We don't know the situation, so it just is what it is. But things weren't particularly easy for Miss Julia either. And I don't know if she ever told Charles that Robert was his or not, but when she starts hitting some, work difficulties, she does end up sending Robert up to Memphis, Tennessee to live with his dad and that family when he's 2 years old. And he even takes on the new surname Spencer, which is what Charles had to end up changing his name to in order to stay alive.
Oh, wow.
And in fact, it wouldn't be too much longer before Julia would end up going up there and joining them, but she doesn't stay in that picture very long. She will move on with her life, move back down south, get remarried, and we'll get there.
But yeah, Robert, he stayed in Memphis until 1919, and that's when he was 8 years old. That's when he actually returns to Mississippi to be with his mother near Robinsonville, and they lived on a plantation. And this time, Julia has a new husband who's 24 years her junior.
Yeah, she's a cougar.
Named Dusty Williams.
Dusty, get that.
And when Robert comes back into town, he ends up picking up the nickname Robert Dusty. And that's all with the neighbors. And, he's allowed to go to school, and he attends Tunica Indian Creek School. And even at an early age, it's pretty well known that Robert had very little interest in working on the farm. That's not the lifestyle he's about. his interests already lay in the harmonica and the diddley bow, like I was talking about earlier.
Yeah.
So this is going to be his instrument for a little bit of time.
Yeah, Robert Johnson's not coming from an elitist background. This, their family's poor, and that's the instruments he's getting to learn on. He favors the mouth harp, which is a very simplistic version of the harmonica.
Yep.
And he likes his diddley bow, and
which I feel like I might even be able to almost play a diddley bow. One string does not seem as intimidating as six.
I feel like doot 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 is not too hard to figure out.
Yeah, I can probably do that. And, according to the census, by the year 1920, he was living in Lucas, Arkansas, with his mother and Will Willis. And he still managed to attend some school in 1924 and 27, but Will Willis was a sharecropper, and this built contention between Robert and his stepfather, who would consider him good for nothing because he doesn't want to work on no farm.
Yeah, I mean, it just isn't Robert's interest to be out, working the fields. And the fact is most farm families understand this feeling. If you grow up in a farm family, you're expected to be out there. He's lucky he even gets to attend school at all. I mean, a lot of people at this point in time in history, if they had children, well, those children should be helping get food on the table and helping make sure we have this house. And he made it very clear that this wasn't what he wanted to do. And his father kind of saw him as good for nothing as long as you're not behind a mule.
But once Robert was done with school, he was really off and running. It started with a marriage in February 1929 to 16-year-old Virginia Travis.
But they've been together for a while. Like, before she was 15 and he was 17. And in these ages right now sound crazy. Like, oh my God, they'd seriously get married at 16?
That's 100 years ago. Things were a whole different world.
Very, very different. But, there were still some feelings about it.
Yeah. And, he signs his marriage certificate to Virginia as Robert Johson. And this is either him using his birth father's last name, or, as some claim, and what I really believe is the real story, he's framing himself after the style of famous bluesman Lonnie Johnson. Later on in life, Robert would travel, and he'd actually start using several monikers, so for him to change his name, change his attitude a little bit, isn't a big deal for him.
It's hard to say why he would have used a different name, because we would know that later on he'd do it a lot. And so to affirmatively say, oh, he's taken on his real birth father's last name, maybe. But in reality, Robert and Virginia, they would go on to live with Robert's half-sister, Bessie, and her husband, and they'd be back in Hazelhurst, Mississippi. And they were actually living in the area dubbed New Africa. But we know from the census, before they even got married, that they were there with Bessie, and Robert would go on to list himself as a farmer, and they listed Virginia as a laborer. Obviously they're no longer going to school, but it's interesting to know that Robert was willing to say, yeah, I'm a farmer now. I got things to take care of, and this is the job I have to do.
Yeah, he's got a family to take care of now, or at least a wife.
But the marriage, it doesn't last. Unfortunately, they get married in February, and by April, Virginia passes away along with the baby during childbirth. And I think with that passing, so did Robert's feelings about why he had to be a farmer or do any of this nonsense that he didn't want to do anymore. And in fact, it's hard to say if it hurt him. Obviously it probably did. A lot of people want to say this turned him into his rambling ways, the love of his life, blah, blah, blah. He's a young guy. He's like 18, 19 years old.
Yeah, that's, you still got so much more life to live at that point.
I mean, he did love her. There's only one thing I have seen that's said about him, and I don't even know if you can necessarily say it was true or not. But there is this one story where he and his pregnant wife are driving down the road, and he's complaining about the state of the road and all the potholes, and they hit one, and he yells something along the lines of, "Hey, road, watch out. My wife, she's percolating." He's just, he's a funny guy, and he really, they had a good time. And it's really sad that this is the way of life and that he lost her, but her family didn't take it well whatsoever. And in fact, they blamed him for losing her, but it wasn't the way you think it was.
No, they definitely blame him because Robert had a habit of playing secular music. The devil's music, not some church hymn at this point.
Yeah, they didn't like that he was out there not only playing the blues, but popular music in general. If it wasn't a hymn, then you were doing something wrong.
Yeah, they felt it was retribution from God that killed her. And they weren't afraid to let anyone know what they thought. And this may have just been the beginning to the start of the sell your soul to the devil rumor. If he's playing the devil's music,
Who knows how much interest he's got going on with the devil.
Yeah, but we're not going to be quite there yet. We still got a few years before we get there.
Yeah, a few years before this starts to become a saying about Robert Johnson. But we might say that this could just be the seed of where that might have begun. But like we said, if he's got no kid and he doesn't have a wife and he doesn't want to be working in the fields and now he doesn't have to, Robert Johnson gets up and he runs, basically. His responsibilities to that are over, and he ends up taking up the life of a true musician. And what he's doing with his time is he's hitting up juke joints in Robinsonville and then also in the nearby towns that he can get to. And he's also following along with his idols. Men like Willie Brown and Son House. Son House ends up moving to his area in 1930. If these guys were coming through town and playing, he knew about it and he was there. Because they meant that's what Robert wanted to be. So he would love to just watch them. And, he'd watch these bluesmen play. He'd flirt with all the girls at the juke joints. But more than anything, he did just want to play with them. And at this point in time, he doesn't necessarily get to play headlining at a juke joint, but he's definitely out on street corners during the day. He's definitely standing out in front of the barber shop or on the steps of the courthouse so that people can see him, they can toss a couple coins, and he's trying to make his living. And not only, like we said before, not only is he not just playing blues, like he was playing anything you wanted, jazz, the popular music. He had this way of listening to a song one time and being able to remember it and try and play it back. He was really good at giving people the music that they would have requested. And again, he's very musically talented, but at the same point, he's all self-trained. So we have to remember, what is it he was self-training on? Well, it was the mouth harp, then the harmonica, and it was the diddley bow. And who knows when he's going to get himself a guitar.
Yeah, when you move from 1 string to 6, that's definitely going to be a big change.
According to Son House, in this one interview, more than 40 years later, Son's trying to recall Robert Johnson, and he does. He's like, yeah, I remember that boy. He used to come watch us. And he basically claimed that at the time, quote, Robert blew a harmonica, and he was pretty good with that, but he wanted to play guitar. And Son House would go on to say that, the nights that he and his band would play at these joints, Robert would be watching them. And then when the guys would go take their break, they put their instruments down, maybe go take a step outside, Robert would jump up, get to the stage, grab their instruments, and start playing. Unfortunately, Robert wasn't good. Son was quoted as saying, "Such a racket you never heard. Folks, they come and say, why don't you go out and make that boy put that thing down? He running us crazy." And I can see it. You're playing, what? You went from a diddley bow, now you're grabbing Son House's guitar?
Yeah, that's not something you do. That's not how you upgrade. You have to take a step in between first.
But the weird thing is in that same interview, he admits that somehow, in some way, it seemed like in 6 months, he left on a tour, came back, and he saw Robert Johnson, and man, could he play. It was outstanding how well he could play. In fact, he made a kind of offhanded comment that he must have sold his soul to the devil.
And perhaps that's true. There's a rumor that followed Robert around that he kind of went out to the crossroads of highways 49 and 61 just before midnight, and there he met the devil who tuned his guitar and traded for his soul. How else in such a short amount of time of 6 months could someone go from causing a racket with a guitar to being such a skilled musician?
Yeah, seriously, it was almost, I don't know, paranormal.
Yeah. However, as much as I'm all for, yeah, you probably sold your soul down to the devil at the crossroads.
We're Americans. We like the easy way.
Yeah, it's so much easier. Most think that nowadays that's not how the story went. It's a lot more benign and less exciting. And it wasn't a few months since Son had seen Robert play. It had been maybe a few years, 2 to 3 years. And according to some of the stories, Robert's actually spending time in the house of the musician named Ike Zinnerman, and he's learning guitar, he's taking lessons, and he's practicing.
Yeah, in fact, at this point in time, Robert's actually married again. By 1931, He gets married to Coletta Craft, but I don't think they're telling anybody about it. He has a persona now to put on, and a big part of that is flirting. A lot of musicians do this. Musicians don't normally go up on stage and then tout their wives around because that's not the persona that the crowd wants to see. So even though they're married, he's not actually spending that much time with her. He goes off to hang out with Ike. He's practicing every day. If he's not on the steps or the sidewalk or working, somewhere with the guitar, he's not at home having dinner with his wife. He's over at Ike Zimmerman's house, like having dinner and playing around on his guitar for 2 to 3 years. It's hard, solid work to get better. And maybe now he just finally has the instrument in his hand to actually practice.
Yeah.
So, of course, with that amount of practice, with his God-given talents in the first place, and then that amount of time going by, that's the more likely reason that Robert gets just as good as he gets. And even at this point, Robert's completely changed his life around. Like, not only is he not staying home with his wife just to go practice, but he's really turning himself more into a wandering musician. He's hopping freight lines, he's catching rides, he's doing whatever he can so that he can actually get into more juke joints than just the local ones around there that already know him. And we know this because he was traveling around with his friend who was also a musician named Johnny Shines. Johnny Shines says, quote, Robert was a natural rambler. So, yeah, it makes sense. Again, by the time that 1932 rolls around, Robert's really freaking good. And at this point, Son just recalls saying, quote, he was so good, when he finished, all our mouths were standing open.
Yeah, and a big part of that, too, is that Robert, he also knows how to play a room. He can rile up the crowd. He's got a few different things he does to kind of keep the crowd entertained, especially the women. Because, yeah, musicians, they're flirts, and they play around a lot. And, that kind of comes back around all the time. But, when you take someone that can't play, and then you can play, and then he also knows how to handle a stage, that's going to really boost how much that person's changed as a musician. And Robert, he was actually slick. Despite the fact that he and Shines were essentially hoboing it from place to place, like Shannon was saying, catching rides, hopping the train, Shines actually recalled that Robert always seemed to be neat and tidy. He could roll into a bar in the same clothes he slept all night in on a train, and he'd still look clean and ready.
Yeah, Robert was a smaller guy. He had these long, tapering fingers. He had one bad eye. He's kind of a small dude. And so he for him, it really did matter the persona he was putting out. And he liked to be well put together, liked to have a nicer suit on, didn't mind if a woman was taking care of him in whatever town he was at. If they were buying that suit, that's just fine with him.
Yeah.
And it mattered. You're out there putting yourself on a stage trying to draw up attention. A schlubby guy's not going to get that. And so this is how he might have pulled more attention into himself. And with that being said, he's putting on this show. Once he starts playing, he just riles up the crowd. He, like Corey said, he knows how to work them. And his favorite part of that, he liked to flirt. A big part of that was playing whatever people wanted him to play. So he was playing music all the way from Bing Crosby to Lonnie Johnson. And he was flirting with every woman in the crowd. And the rumor is, at one point in the show, this is his signature move, that Robert would pick out a particular woman. And for that song, he would sing only to her. And it would drive people nuts. The women would love it. The men would laugh at it. The man who was with that woman would fucking hate your guts.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
It was a great way to get the show, all riled up, whether or not it would end good or it would end bad for, Robert. It's just how he did it. But it wasn't just some way to, rile up the crowds. Robert would rather have a place like a soft bed to sleep in than he would underneath some car or a, carriage or something. So he also supposedly had a habit of trying to find the homeliest woman in the crowd.
So he's a paratrooper.
What in the world?
So when you're traveling for business and stuff, and if you don't, or for whatever reason, you don't want to spend the money on a hotel room, you go to the bar and you try to pick up a girl there so you can go have a place to sleep that night. It works sometimes.
That sounds like a pure schmucky move.
Oh, it is. I'm not saying it's a good person move, but, it's definitely something that people will do, and it seems like that's exactly what Robert's doing.
I feel like that's exactly how Robert felt about it, because he had a system. He picked a homely girl because he thought a couple things about it. He thought, one, she's less likely to have a boyfriend that's going to beat my head in. Two, she doesn't get a lot of attention, so I could probably do the bare minimum, and she's just going to fall all over for it. And three, she'd be more likely to let him come on home and also keep up this act. And whenever he needed to come back into town, hey, these long distance relationships, hey, I'm sorry I haven't seen you in 3 months, babe, but I'm here. Can I stay? Oh, of course, whatever. But I think now it's starting to make more sense why he's starting to use a couple of different names when he might be traveling from place to place. Probably a safer way to keep yourself from getting killed by an angry lover.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. It's definitely a smart move that I never considered.
Yeah, and he's traveling all over at the time. I mean, he's moving all the way from Mississippi to Memphis. He hits up New York. He gets to Chicago. You're not going to find family in all these places. He's not a stupid guy. He just might be a little bit of a whore.
Oh, God. Yeah, he just might be.
But that's the public Robert. And that's not really how Robert kind of seemed to be in private. You got your public Robert where he's moving the crowds. He's got women swooning over him. And then you have the private Robert. And according to his friend Shines, he puts it this way. So, quote, Robert was a friendly person, even though he was sulky at times, And I hung around Robert for quite a while. One evening, he disappeared. He was kind of a peculiar fellow. Robert would be standing up playing someplace, playing like nobody's business. And about that time, it was a hustle with him as well as a pleasure. And money be coming from all directions. But Robert just pick up and walk off and leave you standing there playing. And you wouldn't see Robert no more maybe in 2 or 3 weeks. Like, that was it. That was just, when Robert Johson was done, he was done.
Yeah, it's definitely an aloofness, but there's got to be a reason for it, right?
Well, I mean, so a lot of people like to say, oh, well, he was just really shy and brooding. You could see him sitting somewhere, staring off, contemplating into space, and then he'd get on stage and put on the whole persona. But a lot of people say that there might really have been a reason to this, and that it all had to do with Robert Johnson's music. So, like we said, things in the music scene are changing really fast. And, we are all playing the same songs, but some of us are trying to write new ones. Some of us are trying to figure out a new guitar lick, maybe do this. And a lot of people were saying that at this time, Robert Johnson might just have been perfecting a new, unique way to tune his guitar. And the same goes in hand with a lot of artists. People are jealous and selfish of their work, the thing that's going to make them special and unique. So a lot of people don't like to share their technique. A lot of people don't like to share what it is they're working on. And it was said that Robert Johnson was very much in this way of being. So if you came up and asked him, hey, how you play that? His response was something like, oh, just like you. And that was the end of the conversation. He moved on.
He's not sharing his trade secrets at all.
He's not. And in fact, they're saying things like, well, if Robert Johnson noticed you watching him a little too hard, a little too long, he'd get suspicious, he'd pack his shit up and he'd leave. He was not going to let you sit there and figure out what it was that he made him so special so you could go on and do it too. So it might not be some shy, young kid who doesn't know how to play, because he does.
Yeah.
He literally just doesn't want you screwing him over.
Doesn't want to show you how the devil tuned his guitar.
Right? And it's not your business anyway. So there you
go. This is my
go.
deal. You can make your own. But by 1936, when Robert was 25, he was actually in Jackson, Mississippi for a bit, and he reached out to H.C. Spear. Now, Spear ran a general store, but he also acted as a talent scout.
Yeah, it's kind of like the movie Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? And they need to make some quick cash, so they go play in some guy's can, and the guy just records it. Robert is coming to this guy thinking he can help me get recorded. He can do that for me. But that's not really where this ends, because I think Spear is more of like a talent scout than anything.
Yeah, and, so Spear takes Robert, and he gets him in touch with Ernie Ortle, who's a salesman for ARC Records, ARC, and he'd actually introduce him to Don Law.
And Don Law, for me, didn't mean much until I started looking him up. But evidently, Don Law was the man to freaking know if you were playing any kind of African-American genre of music and you wanted to get recorded. He was doing what people called at the time race records. And he was doing his best to find whatever new and upcoming artist because he didn't care who was buying the record. He wanted that money.
Yeah, and that's, the one thing that I always kind of find interesting, because I think of it as artists, but the producers are just as important. Who they know, what they're after, that can make or break a star.
Well, and just recording them, the sound of it, who gets to listen? Did you get it on the radio? And like we said, this time is changing and things are moving fast, but not everybody has a radio in their house.
Yeah, not
but
yet.
You got people going out to the juke joint. You got people standing outside a bar that has, music playing on the radio. People used to come together just to listen to baseball games.
Yep.
So this was a big deal. If you could get that record, that could completely change your life.
Yeah, and Don Law, so like we're saying, he's a record producer, and it was seen that Robert Johson had finally hit his lucky streak meeting Don Law. Robert sat down with Law in a San Antonio, Texas hotel room at the Gunter Hotel, room 414.
Actually, I've been there, and I'm really freaking mad that I didn't know this fact, or I would have tried to get in that room.
Oh,
my
absolutely,
God.
Right?
It's a beautiful hotel. It like hovers right above the Alamo. Like they're all right there.
Everything in San Antonio is just in the same place, huh?
Yeah, it is. No, I mean, it had become a very big city, but at this time, everything's like right there in the downtown section. And I'm thinking that most likely at the time, this might have been one of the tallest buildings in the town. So he had made, there's a reason he's willing to travel this far and go get himself a record, and they did it. It's this one recording session that pretty much was him recording half of everything we have of Robert Johson. He's only going to get to record twice.
Yeah, and this first time he's actually recording for 3 days in this makeshift studio, and he puts down 16 different tracks. But he also kind of puts down alternatives of each track just because
he's an artist.
He's an artist, and he has a special way of doing things.
It's one of the reasons why we know he's so great is because these aren't just like, oops, we fucked up, let's redo it. He is taking these alternative tracks and he's singing them different ways. So you can see that everything he does is on purpose. Why is he playing it this way? Because he wanted it this way. We know because on this song, he tweaks it to this. It's just something that was really special to have from Robert Johson.
And at this first recording session, he records the songs Come On In My Kitchen, Crossroad Blues, I Believe I'll Dust My Own Broom.
That sounds dirty.
It really, really does.
It probably was.
And the song Terraplane Blues. Now, Terraplane Blues would go on to become a small regional hit and would sell over 5,000 copies. And that day, Robert Johson was paid $100 and headed back to Mississippi.
Yeah, so just like we all know throughout history, if you are the musician getting taken on one of these record companies, you're gonna get screwed.
Yep.
That was probably a lot of money to him at the time, but we all know now what these records could have done for all these guys.
Oh, yeah, especially even back then. And after this recording session, he would actually go on to have his second and final recording session. Like Shannon's saying, he only recorded twice. This time it would be with Law again in a Dallas, Texas studio, and he'd be in there for 2 days in June of 1937.
Yeah, so only a year later, they knew they had something special, and they got him back in there for the second recording. But the thing is from these recordings with Don Law goes on for the next number of years promoting his records and actually really promoting the rumors that circulate around Robert Johson. This is one of the main points in time where this crossroad, see the devil, that this rumor is starting to get perpetuated. Of course, he's singing about meeting someone at the crossroads, right?
Yeah.
And if you're not really listening to the lines that closely, and then you start hearing a rumor about, meeting the devil and selling your soul, that kind of starts egging it on. Now, the song itself is really talking about how damn hard it is to catch a ride off the crossroads when you're hitchhiking. But, over time it changed, and a big part of that was Don Law. And what you have to do is you have to take Don Law with a grain of salt, because when you listen to what he has to say about Robert Johson, since he was the only guy who got to record him, you start realizing he's a little bit off with his words.
Yeah.
So he goes on to claim that he recorded a 19-year-old Robert Johson who, when they went to go record, Supposedly, Robert Johson walks in all shy and somber and absolutely refuses to look at anybody in the room. He walks in, he sits down in a chair, and he stares at a wall, and he starts to play. And that's the only way he plays. And the rumor...
That's a very interesting way to play.
Right? Well, the rumor is, well, he did it because while he was playing, he wouldn't want these guys to see the devil coming out of his eyes.
That's a good reason, yeah.
Another way the story kind of gets manipulated is they wouldn't want to see the devil playing out of his hands actually playing the guitar. Now, doesn't this all sound a little stupid?
It sounds awesome. I would go buy those records right away.
Oh, yeah, that part sounds great. I mean, and that's probably why every rock and roll star has ever been connected to the devil's music and, all this nonsense. But there's a couple things right from the bat that we know are not true about this. First of all, Robert Johson is not shy. The guy's been playing juke joints and street corners and everywhere else known to man, and he knows how to rile up a crowd, but he's suddenly in a room with a couple white guys and he's super shy and won't look them in the eye. That's not how Robert Johson is. In fact, he's not 19 either. He's about 25 at this time.
Yeah.
So, no, he's not ashamed to be seen doing what it is this man knows he's born to do. What a lot of people think he's doing is he's using the acoustics in the room to make him sound good. He knows exactly what he wants to sound like and how he needs to get it. They're in a makeshift recording room in a hotel room.
Yeah.
It's the same thing as us sitting right here on a podcast and everyone... nobody's going to sit here and say, oh my God, the audio quality. Oh my goodness. No, it sucks. It freaking sucks.
We have to do so much to make this room that we're in.
And it still comes out pretty bad.
A mini studio. We've got
blankets and, we're in corners and
we're in
whatever.
We made a fort, an adult fort.
Doing my best to copy Robert Johson by trying to sit us in a corner, because what he's trying to do is he's trying to get the best audio onto these records as possible. So he realizes right then he's got to switch up how it is he plays. Like I said, he's used to playing rooms full of people and having to get his voice over a ton of drunks so that they can hear him and his music. That's not the case with these records. He's grown up listening to records. He knows what it wants to come out as, and he needs it to be his voice and his guitar at the right pitch, a right pickup, to the point that we can prove this, because all you have to do is go listen to his recording of Come On In My Kitchen. The NPR article I was reading really points this out. They say you listen to it, and he just sings it real soft, real quiet. And then it gets to one point where he says the line, "Can't you hear the wind blowing?" And it's almost a whisper. It's meant to make the listener of the record bend forward a little bit, pay a little bit more attention. And yet we all know this is not something he could have ever done on stage. It would not have worked that way.
Yeah.
So he knew what he was doing. He wasn't coming in all shy. He was just making the perfect record.
And it was thanks to these recordings that Robert Johson would get a chance in a lifetime. John Hammond was one of the time's most instrumental promoters of jazz, and he decided to put on a show that would teach the history of African American music. It was called, quote, the new mass. Before I go into this, we're going to use a term that's kind of okay in the 30s, but not okay now. But in order to kind of keep history, we're going to put it in its original way, but just a disclaimer for those, so we're not actually saying this the way it's said. But the show is titled, quote, The New Masses presents an evening of African American Negro music, from spirituals to swing, dedicated to Bessie Smith. And he was going to do this at Carnegie Hall.
Yeah, this is a big deal. That's Carnegie Hall.
Yeah, Carnegie Hall for
and
the show.
The thing is John Hammond, he means it. He has been following jazz and hymnals and, all sorts of music that's coming out of the Black community, and he thinks it's amazing, and he just wants to share it. Not only does he want to share it, he's afraid we're losing it. The same way as a lot of ethnographers at this time realized that with the growing of the United States, people moving around, media blowing up on the radio, that a lot of areas were kind of losing their unique traits, their unique sounds, like languages and accents and music. And blues was that perfect way to show it off. Hey, here's this amazing music that's coming out that I know most of the world isn't listening to, and I want to share it. The problem is not everybody wanted to let him do that. He had a really hard time finding anyone to back him and help him promote this show at all in Carnegie Hall. And so this is truly for people like Robert Johson, who's just barely been on the radio, maybe with the one song that sold 5,000 copies.
Yeah.
He was on a radio show once in Canada. So, you know, he is new in his career, but he's growing. But this would have made him.
It really would have. Because on the billing here, you've got Count Basie and his orchestra. You've got Lester Young, Freddie Green, the likes of Albert Ammons, and Benny Goodman. It's a really big deal. But Robert Johnson would never get to be there. Hammond actually walked onto the Carnegie Hall stage and announced to the crowd that Robert Johnson was, in fact, dead. He went on to claim that on that very day that Robert had received his invitation to play, he was laid low by a jealous lover. Then he took out one of Robert's 78 records and insisted that the crowd had to hear him. He placed the record on a phonograph and he played it through the Carnegie Hall PA system to a stunned crowd.
Yeah, this is also unheard of. We're at Carnegie Hall. We're here to see a live show. What the hell do you mean you're going to play a phonograph to all of us on a crappy overhead speaker? But it worked because he was amazing.
And even just talking about it right now, I'm getting the goosebumps of that kind of power of that moment right there. That, you have this guy who's so awesome and he can't be there, but you need to hear his music. So we're going to do something that's never been done in Carnegie Hall before.
I mean, we're saying this is how good Robert Johnson is. But at the same time, he's like 27. What the hell do you mean he's dead? We literally just said he just recorded. Like, what could have possibly happened? Like, really a jealous lover, you guys? And that's just the thing. When it comes to Robert Johnson's death, we're all just as confused as we are about the whole rumor about selling his soul to the devil. And now there's multiple rumors that swirl around what may have happened.
Yeah.
So the story goes like this. On the 13th of August, 1938, Robert Johnson is playing in a juke joint attached to the Three Forks store near Greenwood, Mississippi. Now, a lot of people like to act like, oh, he just happened to be there that night. But the fact is that he'd been in that area for about 2 to 3 weeks playing. He'd been there constantly. People had gotten to know him. These guys, when you're traveling and it's hard to travel, you stay somewhere for a little bit.
Yeah, you make a scene for yourself.
Exactly. And at this point in time, he's also playing with a bunch of the local musicians too. So he's got local musician Honey Boy Edwards there. He's playing with Sonny Boy Williamson. And it's just fun. Like, at this point in time, I know those like names sound silly. We got Howlin' Wolf, we got Sun, we got Muddy Waters, we've got Sonny Boy, we've got Honey Boy. Like, that's just something, like, they're popular nicknames for the time. And
yeah, absolutely.
Right? And if, like, one blues guy is probably making it with one of those, like, yeah, people start copying it. Just like Robert Johnson might have been copying Lonnie Johnson.
Yeah.
It's, it's just a thing. But either way, they're all having a really great time, playing out here. On this particular evening, along with his, musician friend Sonny Boy Williamson, Robert, he's doing exactly this. He's putting on a good show. He's given all the fixings. And this is up and including flirting with the women in the crowd. And so at the point, Honey Boy, he isn't supposed to come on until about 10:30 that night. So at this point, it's really just Sonny and Robert playing. And as the show progressed, Robert, he's making his usual moves. He's been flirting. And we're getting to the time in the show where Robert likes to do his one move. And he's getting to that song where he's going to pick out one special lady, make his eyes, and drive everybody crazy. And it's this point that Sonny's been playing with him for a while. He knows what's up.
He knows this move.
He knows exactly how it goes over. He knows it could be a hit. He also knows it tends to cause trouble.
Or being hit.
So, exactly. So at this point, Sonny, he's paying attention, and as Robert's getting into his thing, Sonny admits, like, watching the crowd, there's one particular guy that's he doesn't like this very much. So Sonny has a bad feeling. Sonny has a feeling like tonight's not going to go so great. Now, at some point, Robert and Sonny, they have to go on, they take their break. And as they take their break, they're hanging out together, and someone, we don't know who, comes up and offers Robert Johnson an already opened half pint of whiskey. Now, Robert's raising this bottle to his lips when Sonny reaches out and knocks the shit right out of his hand and breaks the bottle all over the floor. This does not go well. Sonny basically...
no, that doesn't go well with anybody.
Yeah, Sonny knocks this bottle out of his hand, and he's quoted as saying, "Man, don't never take a drink from an open bottle. You don't know what could be in it." Just fair point, Sonny.
He's wingmanning at that point.
He's 100% not wrong. But like we said, this doesn't go well. It goes just about as well as you imagine when your friend throws a drink out of your hand and it goes crashing all over the floor.
Or you ask anyone to smile more.
Oh my God. Robert is pissed and he responds, "Man, don't never knock a bottle of whiskey out of my hand." And before Sonny knows what's going on, Robert's got another one. Someone's already there with another already open bottle of whiskey. Robert takes it. Robert swigs it. I mean, he's just pissed off and has a point to make.
Yeah, of course. That's what happens.
But Sonny had already had a bad feeling, and the fact that this bottle just came out of nowhere that quickly, it wasn't a great sign either. Now, the two men go back to playing, but it's not long before Robert actually starts having major struggles on stage. His voice starts giving out. Sonny even tries to pick up the slack with his harmonica. He even sings a little bit himself, but in the middle of playing, Robert just puts his shit down and walks out the door. Now, okay, well, he does that, right? But this time, he is sick.
Yeah.
Like, he's been poisoned, and he's already out in the yard, and he's throwing up. This is not a good point for Robert Johson. In fact, it would never get better, because a lot of people think that he might have been poisoned with strychnine. Now, a lot of people, this is another rumor. This is a myth. We don't ever know. We will maybe never know what happened. A lot of people say there's no freaking way that Robert Johson could be poisoned by strychnine because it has a very distinct smell that even in the hooch of the time, he should have smelled that. They're also saying strychnine should kill you in a matter of hours. Like, you're not making it out the door. Robert made it out the door. Robert made it 3 days in somebody's house before he would die. The thing is, who's ever going to say? Yeah, maybe it smelled real bad, but let's remember where Robert is. Robert's in a dingy, smoky juke joint. He's probably been smoking cigarettes all night. He's probably already had a couple glasses of something himself. And let's be realistic about where this alcohol even came from.
The radiator behind the house?
It could have come from the bathtub right in the, in the woods behind the whole juke joint. At this time, there's no guarantee that you're getting some good, clean liquor. I mean, who's to say that the owner hasn't been opening these bottles and putting in, wood alcohol just to spread out some of the alcohol? We don't know. And to this point, how many of you guys are sitting there in some crap bar and somebody hands you a drink and you go, let me savor the smell. Let me sniff it. No. You hold your breath, you take a gulp, you go, holy shit, I hope that messes me up, and then you move on with your damn life.
Free liquor.
Fortunately, I think this is definitely what's going to end up. It's what lays Robert Johson low. He lays in bed for 3 days. He's over at the Star of the West plantation. He's not home. He's at some stranger's house. And he's actually being refused a doctor because he doesn't belong there. He's not the plantation worker.
Yeah.
He's just some stranger. So nobody who can get him help is willing to do it. And unfortunately, at the age of 27, on August 16th, 1938, Robert Johson dies, and his death is listed as an accident. A lot of the mystery to his death is who the hell did it? Why did they do it? Well, we never caught anybody. His, death is listed as an accident, but we clearly know he's poisoned. A lot of people like to say that, well, unfortunately, the woman that he was flirting with at this juke joint that night just so happened to be the juke joint owner's wife.
That's not the woman you want to go after.
Probably not. A lot of people, there's a rumor that's saying that, she and him, they had gone friendly, that she'd been sneaking out there every Monday to come see him under the guise of, I gotta go visit my sister. And in reality, she was getting it on. But we also have to think about this as Robert went there one night. He wasn't there 3 nights. Robert's been in town for 2 to 3 weeks. He's been doing this same act every night. He didn't just suddenly pick her out of nowhere and do this for one time and just happen to piss off the wrong guy. He's probably been doing this in this guy's bar every night.
Yeah.
So unless suddenly he's just a super jealous guy and how dare you just happen to pick my wife, why would he be so surprised at this? Unless, and I'll give this point, maybe he did realize there was something more going on. Maybe he did just get that jealous. But in the end, we're never actually told who handed Robert Johson the bottle. It's easy enough to judge the juke joint owner because he should have had the first control of the liquor.
Absolutely.
And, okay, somebody's going to hand out liquor. I mean, maybe you're thinking the bartender. But there's no saying that this wasn't some cute little girl that came wandering up to him with a bottle and offered it. What if she liked him? What if that was the house that he'd been staying at and she'd been watching him that night go flirt with another woman? I mean, you cannot put it beyond a number of reasons why anybody would have reached out, gotten jealous, and killed Robert Johson.
Yeah, there's so many different reasons.
But then it doesn't just stop there. Robert Johnson's dead, and he's far away from home, and in the end, he gets buried in a wooden coffin furnished by the county, and he's given a state burial, which means he doesn't get noted where he's placed, and he also doesn't get noted he doesn't have a headstone.
Yeah.
Not even today do we have a definite understanding of where it is Robert Johnson's body is. There's about 3 different places people think that he might be in, and one of the biggest thoughts is that he might be out in the Mount Zion Baptist Church's graveyard. And people over the years have definitely put out a couple placards to him. I mean, he is definitely an iconic, amazing musician that deserves to be remembered. The problem for me is we haven't done him right. He's not home, and we don't know where he freaking is.
Yeah.
Reality of it is, and this is my personal opinion, I think if you look at history and you look at the time, the poor guy died and was given a state burial. He's in a potter's field. The most realistic idea would be to go back to the records for this certain area in Mississippi and just go ahead and find out where the black potter's field was. Because as much as I hate to say it, there would have been segregation there too.
Yeah.
And so at this point in time, like, we have no reason why we couldn't find Robert Johnson's body. We should know where these potter's fields are. We should be able to bring up the bodies. And in fact, we have relatives. He had a son. I mean, the guy passed away a couple years ago, but it doesn't mean that his DNA hasn't been passed down. And it literally means that if we just spent a little bit of time, we could give this man a proper funeral if we wanted to. But, so is more the mystery. How did Robert die? Where is he buried? A lot of people think that he didn't even die from poisoning because unfortunately in the 1960s, his death certificate gets dug back up and it comes to light that there had always been a scrawled message on the back of this death certificate. Unfortunately, it causes a really awful myth around Robert Johnson that, I'll just simply read what the note says, and then we can discuss it from there. The note says, quote, "I talked to the white man on whose place this Negro died, and I also talked with a Negro woman in the place. The plantation owner said the Negro man, seemingly about 26 years old, came from Tunica 2 or 3 weeks before he died to play banjo at a Negro dance given there on the plantation. He stayed there in the house with some Negroes saying he wanted to pick cotton. The white man did not have a doctor for this Negro as he did not work for him. He was buried in a homemade coffin furnished by the county. The plantation owner said it was his opinion that the man died of syphilis."
That's not how it goes.
Yeah, so now it comes around that the rumor is the great Robert Johnson may have died from syphilis. Can we please break this down and why this is so not true? First of all, we all know Robert Johnson to be a man who does not want to pick cotton.
Yeah, that's not what we know from him from his childhood. He didn't want to be a farmer. He listed farmer on a census once because he had a wife with an expecting kid.
And at this point in time, he has absolutely no reason to suddenly show up on some plantation and start picking cotton.
Yeah, he's been playing guitar for the past 11 or 9 years.
Oh, well, not even that. He's literally been playing guitar in town the last 2-3 weeks. He's making his money.
Yeah.
The most realistic option is that he's staying at somebody's house off on this plantation, and, they have to give it a reason why he's even out there in the first place. Maybe he even did, if somebody maybe had noticed him being around and, "Hey, what you doing here? Hey, I'm looking for work," and it's just an easy pass off. But the reality of it is no, Robert Johnson's not out here picking cotton, to the point where even the owner says, "I'm not getting you a doctor because you didn't work for me."
Yeah, you ain't one of mine.
But to top it off, to say that he died from syphilis, first of all, the doctor doesn't say this. It literally says the owner of the plantation thinks.
Who's probably not a doctor, I'm going to guess.
Most assuredly not. And to boost this up even more, this is a racist profiling done on black people of this time. So if you were to go back into any death certificates, look out like through death certificates, and you keep popping up with a black man or a black woman and it just happens to have the reason is syphilis and nothing else, most likely it's not true.
Yeah.
A lot of people are just, oh, they're all riddled with STDs, and they just, no. It was just a cop-out to be like, well, I think, whatever, and we don't really have to look into any further reason as to why somebody would have died. I mean, if you had looked over Robert Johson and done an autopsy, it would have surely shown that no, syphilis was not how he died. In fact, you don't just die from syphilis in 3 days.
No, it eats you up.
It literally eats your brain. It melts your brain away. It can disfigure your body. This is something that will kill you for years to come. In fact, we just talked about it a couple episodes when we were talking about the big-eared dwarf. His dad was alive for years. The reason his son had so many health issues is because his dad had syphilis.
Yeah, so it passes on, right?
It passes on. You're around a lot, and you know what? People know you have syphilis. It's pretty damn clear. But that's not Robert Johson. Not in the slightest. This is a horrible rumor that's been promoted from racism from the 30s and just so happened to picked right back up in the 60s from an offhanded note somebody happened to catch. It would have been better had it just never come to light, in all honesty.
And part of the whole mystery of Robert Johnson's death, too, is that, this show at Carnegie Hall when he was 27 years old was going to be the biggest show. This was going to make or break his career. And you know how there's that little rumor that he sold his soul to the devil? Mm-hmm. Well, we're making it so you're just about to get famous. You're on your track to get famous. Contract finished, and the devil comes to collect his soul.
Yeah. You made a deal with me that you wanted to be the best blues man in the world, and this would have identified you as that. Contract done.
So you didn't need to be identified as it. You are it because you're gonna go here. But this, like we're saying, he probably didn't sell his soul to the devil. That's actually kind of attributed to another blues man by the name of Tommy Johson.
Yeah, see where that could have gotten mixed up pretty quickly?
According to Ishman Bracey and Tommy's brother Lettle, the story was that actually Tommy Johson was talking to them about, I need to get really good. So he was going to go out to the crossroads. He even made the mention that you go out just before midnight, so you arrive at the crossroad at midnight.
Yeah, you want to be timely for the devil.
Yeah, you don't want to keep the devil waiting. He's not going to wait. You need to be there at midnight. So you get there a little bit beforehand. You wait for him to approach you. And he's going to come out of the woods. And sometimes the devil's a black man. And he's just going to take your guitar from you. And he's going to tune it for you and give it back. And without any words spoken, that's your deal with the devil. You gave him your instrument, and he made it the instrument to have.
Yeah, contract done. Signed off. We don't have to say nothing.
Yeah, you don't need to sign it in blood here. We know what's going on. I'm the devil.
A lot of people who are actually close to Robert Johson always seem to be really baffled by how this rumor seemed to get connected to him. And in fact, his buddy Shines said, man, Robert never said any of that. I would have remembered that. In fact, had Robert told me that the reason he was so good was that he sold his soul to the devil, I would have said, man, you can't do that. You can't do nothing with your soul. That's not your choice.
Yeah.
So all this was just pure nonsense. It was just the fact that he was playing blues music, which a lot of people love to attain to the devil's music, is the fact that he had his, in-laws family talking about his devil's music basically killed his wife.
Yeah, the retribution right there.
The fact that he plays a well-known song that many men are playing that has to do anything with the crossroads, and that literally it's a superstition in many cultures that's a point of magic, a special spot. That's the place you go do whatever stupid magic shit you want to go do.
Because you've got choices at that point. You hit a crossroads, you've got 4 options to take. You can go back the way you came, and go left, straight, or right.
Or the fact that a lot of people believe crossroads just naturally happen to end up on a lot of ley lines. It's a lot of weird superstition and rumors that fly around that just somehow kept getting stuck, but it stuck to the wrong guy. It's not Tommy Johson, it got stuck to Robert Johson. Did Robert Johson sell his soul to the devil? No, the man was a guitar god. He didn't need the devil, he's just damn good. So that really is what breaks it down. The myth, the legend, Robert Johson. He was laid low at 27, started the 27 Club.
We didn't even get into all of that. That's going to be a whole nother episode we'll have to do one day.
Yeah, but reality of it is we might never know. Until, there's so little to actually bring up picture-wise, his own words. It's hard to figure out who Robert Johson was. And until we ever find his body, we'll never know how he died either. So until then, we don't know where he is and we don't know how he died, but we do have his records. And I highly suggest you guys go take yourself a nice glass of whiskey that won't kill you. Go sit in your favorite chair and go give Robert Johson a good old listen.
You definitely need to do that, guys. That's definitely what we're going to be doing just after we hit end on this episode.
Yeah, I can't wait.
And with that, I think that's where we're going to leave you guys. So thank you for coming around for this week's episode. Hope you enjoyed it.
Yeah, we're glad you guys came by, and we can't wait to talk to you next week. We'll see you then.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.